Sup, homie students. Welcome to Iain Talks History, as we take an awesome journey through a period of time in a place that existed. Today we will be discussing how to conduct a history research project. So the majority of this video is going to be going through internet databases and giving you some insight into how to begin to set up a history research project, whether it be a research essay or a document analysis. Research begins with a problem. Some kind of uncertainty, a gap in our knowledge, or a disagreement among historians that requires some new research for you to form your own independent opinion on the issue. Research is not about memorizing what other people have said. It's about learning what has been said so that you can make your own independent contribution to that conversation. Don't forget, everything has a history. Whatever you are interested in, be it science, industry, business, law, medicine, all of these things have a history. And through historical research, you can go a long way to deepen your knowledge and understanding of many other aspects of your life. Treat history research as an opportunity to better yourself and to give yourself a deeper and more complex understanding of something that is meaningful and important in your life. In this video, we will take the example of Canadian history, and we will be exploring some topics related to women's suffrage and other popular topics for student papers. Unless you are already familiar with the topic, you will need to start somewhere to begin developing the search terms and keywords that you will need to kick up some useful research sources. A good place to start is books, but there's a really good chance that, especially in our current circumstances, you don't have access to such a convenient and informative collection of primary and secondary sources at your disposal. So why don't we start with what is available and get online and see what we can kick back. Whoa. Welcome to Google. Let's say, for example, we want to learn more about the history of women and women's rights in Canada. This is a popular topic for students, and one in which I would particularly emphasize the breadth and complexity of the topic. I mean, women are half of all people, and their history is equally vast and intersects with every other part of the Canadian experience. So when we get onto Google, we can type in something really general and really basic. History. Women, Canada. We get the expected popular sources, newspaper articles, some Government of Canada websites, all those kinds of things. But we're going to start with the encyclopedias. Now, obviously, we have the history of Canadian women from Wikipedia, but I think that you would be better off looking for this article. The Canadian Encyclopedia is a better source for the reason that it's being written by authors who have scholarly credentials, and they provide a more balanced and more accurate summary of topics. Wikipedia, in contrast, can be kind of hit or miss, especially for Canadian history topics that might not receive the same kind of popular attention as others. So when we get onto the Historica Canada website, we can see a few words come up very quickly. I mean, it doesn't take long to scroll down before we start to see suffrage. And this is the kind of thing that we're looking for. Keywords and search terms that we can plug into our primary source database to begin finding some actual direct sources to research this topic. If we come over here to Canadiana Online, by CRKN. This is a great website. It's free to use. This is the kind of place that we want to find primary sources for a document analysis. Now, ideally, what you're looking for on this website is going to be a 10 to 20 page pamphlet. Avoid the newspapers because it's really hard to find great sources. Try to find some other pamphlet-sized materials. So if we come here and we just try our term, suffrage, right off the bat, we get some amazing choices for an analysis. Some of the longer sources, you can see here 8 pages, 8 pages. Those are great. 18 pages, a little on the longer side, but definitely valuable. 62 pages, well, these are the kinds of things that you would want to try to narrow down the topic, not look at the whole document unless you're really getting into like a 12 to 15 page paper range. 375 pages, obviously out of the question for a short analysis. But if we just take this one for a second, our first result here would be a great choice for a short analysis. In telling the story of the suffrage movement, McDennison is choosing specific examples and specific arguments in order to convince her reader that the suffragettes were reasonable and that the votes for women were just. Think about how she tries to be convincing, why she chooses specific examples and arguments, and how the opinions expressed in the document represent larger debates and problems in Canadian history. If you were going to write your document analysis on this piece, you would want to think about why McDennison's writings can help us understand something special or underappreciated about the suffrage movement. Don't go to a source like this and simply repeat the general history of women's suffrage, right? Doing a document analysis is about explaining why this one piece can give us something that is not possible by just running through the standard list of facts and interesting things. Now, come down, we look at some of the disenfranchised is a word that has come up on a number of articles here. So let's see. Disenfranchised. Maybe this is something that we can, learn how to type, eh? Oh, Daily Mail. See, this is the kind of newspaper articles, it is really hard to sort through these things. And unless you know what you're looking for, and you have some idea of where to locate it, this is a really hard place to begin research. There are other better ways to go about it. As we see here, though, sometimes the page numbers lie, okay? So keep in mind there's these test sheets, because a lot of this stuff was coming off of microforms from way back in the day, and so they had test screens to make sure that the resolution on the camera was good. Now, what you can see here is letters by a railway company. This isn't what we were looking for. We were looking for something related to the disenfranchisement of women. But it's a great example here of how sometimes the things that you find can be very, very interesting, even though they aren't the things that you're looking for. Now, if we come back again, maybe you're just not finding something that's piquing your interest. So we want to keep looking for more search terms. The Provincial Freeman. Okay, we've got Marianne Shadd, we've got the Provincial Freeman, we've got a couple of interesting search terms that we could look for here. We could try Marianne Shadd. The Portion of Labor. Well, you know what? 592 pages, that's probably a little more than we want to tackle here. Now, we can have somebody who is an important historical figure who does not give us, did I misspell her name? Let's see if that makes a difference. So sometimes a misspelled name can give you a different result, but not always. This isn't a perfect process. Now, if we try it again, if we went for the Provincial Freeman, okay, so we do have copies of the Provincial Freeman. So if you were looking through here and you found some material, or you had some way to narrow it down, maybe if you got here and you started searching through, you could find some articles on an important issue. But a lot of this stuff you can see here, it's not something that you can easily sort through. So again, that's why I say you're really looking for pamphlets and specific texts that give you a strong opinion you can analyze without forcing you to do a ton of legwork that won't actually improve the analysis by the end. We also have some very important and valuable databases if you're interested in more military history. Military history is my specialty, and so these are things that will give you a really easy way to access some awesome primary sources on really important events, and they're also places that are really easy for analysis because they have propaganda, and it's a simple objective to look for the propaganda slant as it presents itself in wartime records. One of the absolutely fantastic sources that we have available is the Canadian Letters and Images project put on by Vancouver Island University. As you can see here from the collections, we've got pre-1914, World War I, World War II, Korea, post-Korea. When you go to these collections, they're all organized by name, so it can take some time to browse the names. But there are women, there are young people, there are all kinds of diaries, pictures, letters, records, all kinds of valuable stuff if you wanted to look at the individual experience of war. These would be the direct primary sources so that you can talk about the war itself and how individuals were experiencing those cataclysmic events. Another great source for the indirect primary sources that you can use for your analysis is the Democracy at War Canadian newspaper excerpts that are available from the Canadian War Museum. This is a fantastic collection. I believe that this was originally derived from the Hamilton Spectator archive that was given up when they digitized, and so these old files that journalists had used to write their stories and research, what previous journalists had said on a particular topic, those were given to, I believe, Memorial University in Newfoundland, and then they were digitized as part of this collection. But what you would find here is that there's a lot of Globe and Mail, Toronto Daily Star, tons of Hamilton Spectator, and a bunch, if you're interested in French language sources, a ton of great material from Le Devoir, the Montreal newspaper that you can see here. The beauty of this site is that it has already categorized a lot of those newspaper articles into topics, so that if you're interested in a particular aspect like the family in the war, you've got a bunch of articles that are already selected for you. Now, depending on the length of the articles and the length of the analysis you're expected to complete, you may want to narrow down your choices. Maybe get rid of something that's not quite on the right topic, or maybe choose a specific date range to focus on. Family allowances are all pretty tight timeline from 1943 to 45, but others, like women in the war, are much more spread out over the course of the war, and to be honest, this is actually the most frustrating part of this database, because this makes it seem like women in the war is one single bite-sized topic, and it really isn't. If you're interested in women in the war, I would recommend looking at some of the other aspects like wage and price controls, family allowances, salvage, even cities at war. Because women in the war, it's too big, and pretending that it's simple is a really easy way to set you off on the wrong track for a history paper. The third easy access source that I would like to recommend is the Library and Archives Canada. If you're someone that is more interested in working on film, there are some great indirect primary sources on Library and Archives Canada that include newsreels primarily from the Second World War and the Korean War. But when we get here to the newsreel collections, economic propaganda, right? We've got stuff from the 1920s, 1930s. These are all really valuable records and great primary sources that can be analyzed. Again, think about the choices the filmmaker is making. Think about how these documents are reflecting on those larger social processes. Do not treat these kinds of sources as purely factual information. Do not repeat what they say without criticism. They are trying to angle things for the agenda of the creator. Hydroelectric power on the farm in 1923. Well, think about how that is tied to investment, to product innovations, to marketing and advertising, to the government desire to promote the Canadian image and Canadian competence, Canadian prosperity to places both at home and abroad. Look for bias and slant and messaging. Don't assume that anything here is going to be as simple as truth or lies. Even film is being edited and selected to portray a certain representation or image that suits the creator's purpose. Think about how these sources, whatever the source is, think about how it tells us about Canada at war. Indirect primary sources are not here to tell us the individual experience. You would need to go back and get those letters, diaries, and personal documents to tell an individual story. If you go on and look at newspapers or at newsreels, you're thinking about how Canada, at the social level, is responding to these large events and how they're being told about what is going on in the world around them. So, as we look at the expanse of source material here, it should be obvious that it will be very easy to find an effective source for this project. If you want something that is easily discovered and can be analyzed as propaganda or personal experience, this war documents are really great. If you want to look more at suffrage or at a social history topic, an economic history topic, then you really want to get onto Canadiana Online and look for a reasonable sized pamphlet that takes a strong position you can explain and engage with.
And that concludes the online portion of the tour. Beam me up.
By now you should have a solid grasp of how to go about finding documentation for a history analysis project, or to begin a longer research project. We talked about how to use popular internet sources and the material that you can find through things like Google, Wikipedia, Canadian Encyclopedia, or other online sources to begin the process of identifying effective research sources. We then looked at how to use databases like Canadiana Online, Canadian Letters and Images Project, Canadian War Museum website, and YouTube itself in order to find interesting and informative primary documents that you can build your analysis around. All of those sources are flexible, and there are many other options, but this should give you a pretty good grasp of the basics of getting started and get you moving in the right direction. Understand that the more you read, the more you know, the more you will understand how much there is left to know. History is complicated, so read more.